Welcome to the Big Idea Talk, session 2. My name is Noor and I am the founder of Disruptivist, where our mission is to amplify the power of the arts as a tool for social change and innovation. And I am privileged to be here with all of you, and it's been a privilege to be interacting with these inspiring Big Idea Talk speakers. Before we begin, I would like to acknowledge and pay my deep respect to the Lenape people. I'm joining you from New York. So yes, I would like to acknowledge and pay my deep respect to the Lenape people, elders and ancestors of the past, present, and future. I acknowledge and offer gratitude to this Lenape land as we're gathered here right now together virtually. And I invite you to join me in that acknowledgement, in that respect, and invite you to reflect upon the land upon which you stand. In our commitment as changemakers to truth and to justice, it is our responsibility to work towards reconciliation and to hold the systems in place accountable. Our values hold us accountable, and today in this session, our speakers are going to share the role of values in discovering solutions and the role of values in terms of leadership when working towards collective success. Today we are starting off with Dr. John Mighton, who is a playwright turned mathematician and author who founded Jump Math as a charity in 2002. His work in fostering numeracy and in building children's self-confidence through success in math has been widely recognized. And his big idea talk, Extreme Equality to All, to discuss why math is the key to a more inclusive and prosperous society is what we'll be starting off with today. John, I hand it over to you.
Thank you. So I'll just call up my slides. So I'm really honored to be participating in the exchange. I'm a mathematician, but I came to math very late in life. I didn't have the confidence to go into math until I was in my 30s. And around the same time, I started tutoring students who were struggling. One of my first students was in a remedial grade 6 class, and his mom was told he could never learn math. He was just too challenged. So a couple years ago, he invited me out to lunch to celebrate the fact that he's now a fully tenured math professor. So based on my own struggles in math and observing thousands of students, I really have come to believe that we all have more potential in math than we allow ourselves to believe. So about 20 years ago, I started a charity, Jump Math, aiming to help teachers help all of their students learn math and love learning math. So on our website, there are free lesson plans for the full curriculum for Canada, for the US available for grades K to 8. So if you're a teacher or parent and want to help students, you can go to our website and find those resources. Jump is listed on the Evidence for ESSA website. It's been featured in Scientific American Mind. I was invited to give a keynote at the Aspen Brain Forum about the research in cognitive science that supports our approach to teaching. And the research also suggests that math is a much more important subject than people tend to think. So, you know, most people are surprised to learn that a number of longitudinal studies have shown that for young kids, math is a stronger predictor of student success at school than reading or attention skills. And, you know, outcomes in all areas of life, including a person's financial health and their physical health, are tied to math achievement at school. But I think there are other reasons why it's important to make sure every child can think mathematically and rationally. You know, in the past couple decades, the world has been shaken by these global crises that seem to be becoming more serious and more frequent. So we had the financial crisis, we now have a pandemic, and we have a looming environmental crisis. And I think all of these problems are exacerbated by the fact that people really don't understand risk, probability patterns. They don't know how the effects of their actions add up, and they don't have a deep respect for science. So you know, it's clear that math is important, but unfortunately across North America, math scores have declined in the past decade. These are a few examples. In Ontario, we do pretty well on international tests, but better than the US, but our pass rates in grade 6 are declining significantly. So this is very alarming given the importance of math. And I think we have to ask why, with all our investment in new technologies, new teaching methods and curricula, why are we struggling to move the needle? So I want to share with you a case study that was reported in the New York Times. A teacher tested her kids coming to grade 5 on a test of achievement. And this shows the distribution of marks. There were kids as low as the 9th percentile and as high as the 75th, with the average in the 54th. And that would represent a 3 grade level difference between the top and bottom kids as early as grade 5. And this is universal in all the schools I've visited. In fact, this is a private school where parents are paying money to produce this difference. And I call this intellectual poverty, which cuts across all social classes. We just assume there are going to be strong students in math and weak students, and there's not much we can do about it. So the teacher followed our lesson plans with fidelity for a full year and real enthusiasm, and tested her kids in grade 6, and that's what the bell curve looked like. It was a spike at the 98th percentile with the lowest mark in the 95th. And a year later, she had her kids 2 years, they all signed up for the Pythagoras math competition, and all but 3 got awards of distinction, and the other 3 came close. So that's the kind of potential that's in children universally in grade 5 that we are really wasting because we don't believe everyone can do math. So we've seen these results in very different settings. So this is in Brooklyn. In inner city schools in Brooklyn, we saw huge changes over a couple of years in the pass rates in schools. This shows some grade 7 results. You can see in one school, they went from 5% passing to 60% passing in a couple of years. And we've also seen these results in a much bigger randomized controlled trial. So if you look on the right, you can see in the second year of the study in the high fidelity groups, the JUMP students made significantly more progress in problem solving with a very large effect size. So these results really raise the question, why is this possible? How can the gap close so quickly? And recently, neurologists did brain scans of mathematicians like myself, and they found something surprising. They found that mathematicians use a very primitive part of the brain that has the same sense of space and number that kindergarten kids do. And I could have told you that because logicians proved 100 years ago that all math can be reduced to very trivial concepts that or virtually all math that anyone can understand. Also, psychologists have shown that we can develop abilities in any field using a method called deliberate practice, where you push yourself a little outside your comfort zone and consolidate and practice skills and concepts with the help of an expert or a teacher. So this raises a second question, why have all our investments, our huge investments in education, not produced better results in math? And I'm going to argue that it's partly because school systems aren't really equipped to gather and evaluate evidence and act on it, rigorous evidence, and also because the design of our math programs is really inherently inefficient. So educators everywhere are, want to produce 21st century learners who can solve problems, who can persevere, who love solving problems. And certainly we want to do that in JUMP. And most educators believe that students will benefit and have a right to work on, really rich, deep, complex, relevant problems. And I agree with that too, but it really depends on what you mean by those things. So if you try and create a math problem and you look at what are the dimensions of a problem that you can vary, you could vary the depth of the concepts or the depth of the communication required from the students, or you could change the number of concepts or the number of steps. Those are how you could make problems harder. And we've surveyed teachers and asked them, if you had to teach all of your kids chess, would you prefer to use a program where from the beginning of the year, all students play the full game of chess, and they have to explain their thinking, eventually stronger players emerge and they all find their level? Or would you rather have a system where students start with mini games that have been designed to draw kids' attention to the patterns, the structure of chess, to allow everyone to succeed, to make discoveries so the kids are having fun playing, and gradually increase the complexity so by the end of the year they're playing the full game everyone is moving together. It's not just a few kids who are playing well. And teachers universally say, I'd rather use a second system. And that's good because the research in cognitive science shows overwhelmingly that the second approach is far more efficient and is the only way to produce problem solvers efficiently. We have to avoid cognitive overload when we teach. We have to break challenges into more manageable chunks and give more guidance to students so they see the deep structure of whatever problems they're working on. But oddly, educators like teachers, principals, superintendents, math evaluators, and even philanthropists seem to have trouble transferring this insight when they select and evaluate math programs. So I've evaluated dozens of math programs in the US and Canada, and I can tell you that every single program I've evaluated, by the end of Unit 1, kids are expected to solve problems that demand the full degree of rigor and complexity for the full year. So they have to communicate about their answers, explain their answers, read very wordy word problems, deal with multi-step problems, real-world relevant problems with some complexity. Even if they've only learned one concept, they have to go to the full depth on that concept, and that continues through the year. And we know what cognitive science says about that approach, but we can't seem to see the disconnect when we select math programs. So the JUMP program is built very differently. We start with review lessons that quickly bring students up to grade level and level the playing field. Nobody's bored because we always have bonus questions that don't go off topic. And gradually the complexity and rigor gets harder and harder through the year. And only at the end of the year are kids working on the deepest problems. And that leads to kids who can write math competitions. So it's not like you're holding anyone back. Everyone moves further together. And this is important not only because of the efficiency, the cognitive efficiency of this, but it has a huge impact on the social and emotional state of children. So Carol Dweck, who wrote the book Mindset, once watched a JUMP class, and she said that because we keep kids in a zone where they're doing things that look hard but aren't too hard, and they're constantly stretching themselves but are not afraid to stretch themselves, that would help them, and are guided by the teacher to see the relevant concepts and structures, that would help them develop a growth mindset. And this is a picture of an actual class. This is in the Lower East Side in New York. That's how excited the kids get. This school got the greatest gains on the New York State test of all schools in New York out of a million kids. And the teacher wrote a blog for Achieve the Core saying that her kids won't stop doing math. They'll do it for hours. And I mentioned I'm a playwright. And when I started volunteering in inner city classrooms, I saw the students as an audience. And it's the only advantage we have of putting kids in a group. They're an audience. And they'll never get more excited than when they feel something together or discover something together. Durkheim called it collective effervescence, and you can see that here. When you take away the visible academic hierarchies and everyone's working on roughly the same material and not comparing themselves and feeling inferior, their brains can work and everyone starts moving together. And because math is inherently easy, everyone can move together, or virtually everyone. And for me, that's the greatest loss that comes from the inefficiencies of our system is, kids are born with this incredible sense of wonder and curiosity, this love of learning, and they gradually lose it through failure and by comparing themselves and feeling inferior in subject after subject. And that we can't even put a price on that loss, I think. And so, if you're a change maker or an educator, I'd really encourage you to be optimistic. JUMP started as a tutoring program in my apartment. I had no idea where it would go or where the kids would lead us. But also to be humble and to be guided by, to constantly test and refine your ideas, and to be guided by evidence, and to be guided, if you're an educator, by the science of learning. And but also have the sense of optimism that you can, if you take that step, really change people's lives. So thank you. I've really enjoyed talking to you.
Thank you so much, John. Up next, Dewi Baziraki. Dewi is actually our only student of the Big Idea Talk session this year. He's a current undergraduate senior at the University of Rochester, where he studies business analytics and computer science. He comes from Uganda and has acquired an education in his home country, as well as Costa Rica, the US, and China. Before Dewey starts, I just wanted to remind everyone that you please feel free to share in the chat your questions, your thoughts, and we will be getting to them after our speakers. Dewey, I hand it over to you.
Thank you, Noor. Let me just share my slides here. Please let me know if you can see them just fine and hear me, right?
Yep, perfect.
All right, so thank you, everybody, and welcome to my talk. So at the start of my talk, I'm going to pose a question to you. What is innovation, and what does innovation mean to you? Today, we normally think of innovation as the next big idea, the next biggest tech company, and so forth. However, I want us to take a step back. Let's look at innovation through the lens of problem solving. Yet again, today, developed nations set precedents, an example for developing nations to follow. However, what else can we learn from developing nations that can inform our knowledge on how to make the world a better place? Throughout the presentation and talk, I bring examples from entrepreneurs, model countries, and global scenarios that require us to work together to achieve this purpose. Yet again, as I talk today, I want you to think, what can you possibly do to solve your community problems? And what are you doing to promote the sustainable development of humanity? Right. So I start with road safety. And why is road safety important? Well, one, it's because I come from Uganda, a very beautiful country in East Africa. However, we do have a challenge. One of the biggest causes of mortality come from road traffic incidents, also known as road traffic accidents. 50% of these accidents occur on borders. What's a border? These are local transportation means. They're motorcycles that people use for transportation. So I recall upon one experience that I have where I witnessed a rider, a mother, and her baby get involved in an accident. The rider was fortunate enough to miss the car collision, but all of them ended up on the floor. The rider flew off the bicycle, the mother flew off the motorcycle, and the child was left skidding on tarmac. Such an event has scarred me for life. So just as you can see in the image on the left, you can see a rider with 4 children, and with himself inclusive, that makes it 5 people on a machine meant for 2 people. This is why I move forward to understand what did entrepreneurs do, or what did the change maker do in their community to solve this problem. So here I primarily look at Safe Border. Safe Border is like an Uber for motorcycles in Uganda, and they carried out a different approach, a different strategy that first primarily saves lives. 2, they made helmets mandatory, not just for the rider, but also for the passenger. They only accept carriage of 1 passenger, meaning there was less likelihood of an accident. They also ensure that there was proper certification, and they also take the riders through a training program. This all, in the end, shows there was total observance of traffic laws. And what do we see as the outcome? Safe border riders are 39% less likely to be involved in a crash. Hence, more lives are being saved. I move forward to education. How does education play a role in helping us solve community challenges? I specifically look at the United States of America, focusing on the University of Rochester, where I've acquired my 4 years of college education, and specifically reflecting on my experience working in an innovation center called the Barbara J. Barger Eye Zone, located in the library, the change maker hub in our university. So we clearly need creativity in the education sector. How do we achieve this? Through design thinking. Design thinking, this is a reiterative process to solving problems. 1, you begin by empathizing with your user or customer, understanding their pain points. Move forward to define a problem statement, brainstorm multiple ideas, select one which you'll prototype, and then you test to get feedback from your users in order to go through the cycle again. I recall an experience I've had at the university where I was given an opportunity to teach about 70 students from different African countries, and they use a design thinking methodology to solve cross-sector problems ranging from education, health, infrastructure, amongst others. One team specifically comes to mind when they were solving a challenge in a place in Tanzania. There were girls, schoolgirls, walking long distances from home to school. Along the way, they would at times experience sexual harassment. So in order to prevent this, the team came up with an idea to create housing closer to the schools. So moving forward, we need diversity and inclusion in our team dynamics. Just as the US built its economy by having people from different backgrounds, ethnicities, and cultures, so do we need this in our team. The diversity brings multiple perspectives. And of course, with multiple perspectives, there was conflict. But there was beauty in this conflict because as it's getting solved, we get the most well-rounded and usually the best idea. Moving forward, we need to critically look at data and numbers in figuring out our problems. In order to get the best impact, we need to understand what the statistics say so that we're creating the solution that caters towards the problem. Lastly, one of the things I greatly appreciate with the US education has been the emphasis of the girl child in education. This is why I urge all policymakers, change makers, and people in positions of authority to ensure there was a good infrastructure for girls to attain a great education. All right, moving forward, I look at sustainability. As you're all aware, we're in an era of global warming, and we're exploiting our natural resources to extents that we do not understand and how they will affect us. I specifically look at Costa Rica as a country because I've lived there and I've seen some of their renewable practices that are actually being implemented and are helping their current life standards. They made a goal that by 2021, they would generate electricity without a single watt from hydrocarbons. Hydrocarbons are chemical compounds that come from fossil fuels that cause health issues, such as cancer. So as we promote sustainability, it's not just for the environment, but for the improvement of human health. In the last 30 years, they've used renewable energy, such as wind and solar, to make up 93% of their energy needs. I come from a country where we still use firewood and charcoal to meet our energy needs. And as we move into a sustainable future, I hope to see more renewable energy practices, and this is why I'm particularly taking research into solar energy to create another alternative. 30% of Costa Rica's territory is protected natural land, meaning that upcoming generations will partake in their biodiversity. They have an organization that assigns businesses with leaves for eco-friendly practices. If a business has one leaf, it means they barely practice any eco-friendly practices, versus having 5 leaves, showing that they're fully committed to eco-friendly practices. And this builds better trust between customer and the business. Over the past 25 years, they've tripled their GDP while doubling forest cover. I recall in Uganda before, as a young child, driving with my parents a long distance over miles and miles of forest cover. However, right now, if I do the same today, the forest cover has greatly diminished. And I hope moving forward, we can have a better understanding of economic growth as well as environmental sustainability. So as leaders, the goals we set matter, and the environment is part of our values. I move forward to community service and reflect on my experience in a United World College. Here, their mandate is to make education a force to unite people, nations, and cultures for peace and a sustainable future. So here I urge my fellow peers and others in higher education to make community service compulsory in college education. Why? Because it creates a standing commitment to improving the community, it bridges the class gap, promotes social empathy, and builds social trust. I can recall certain examples of what I did at the school, such as cleaning trash from beaches, rehabilitating a nursery school in the countryside, rehabilitating a forest reserve, amongst others, such as other practices my peers did, including supporting the disabled, teaching others better new languages in the community. And all these actions still today motivate me to encourage my peers to create new initiatives and startups for people to make an impact in their community or environment. Lastly, I talk of healthcare management. As you're aware, today, we're going through a global pandemic. the COVID-19 virus. It has affected millions of lives and claimed hundreds of thousands. However, together we can make this stop. I greatly urge you all to stay at home to save other lives. I fully send my appreciation to the health staff at the front lines of combating this virus. Lastly, I urge governments to look into using data and artificial intelligence to understand the spread of the virus and how to better curb it to protect our lives. So in the end, what are the key takeaways? 1, innovation is problem solving. 2, we need educational-based innovation, meaning education should be deeply rooted in our educational system. 3, environmental sustainability is a value. And in order for you to create and solve your community problems, as well as promote the sustainable development of humanity, we all need to work together through collaboration. Thank you.
Thank you, Dewi. Yes. Community service is definitely really important, especially in these times. And next up, Jose Campi is joining us from Ecuador. He works as the coordinator for applied research projects at the Universidad Casa Grande in Ecuador. He's a firm believer in inclusive, horizontal, and interdisciplinary approaches towards solving social issues and in aiding others as a moral imperative. He has a master's in gender and media studies from Sussex University and is currently working on his PhD in equity, inclusion, and innovation in Spain. And Jose is gonna talk to us today about the importance of service at being at the core of academia.
So, hi, thank you, Nora, for that introduction. My name is Jose Campi. Let me see if, okay, that's me. Well, that was me when my students knew me first and I had a lot more hair. I'm from Guayaquil, Ecuador. Guayaquil is a small, well, not so small city, 3 million people city in Ecuador in South America. I was born and raised here, and I grew up loving comic books, sitcoms, and sci-fi shows, especially Buffy the Vampire Slayer. I bring this to mind because when I was growing up and watching them, my mom and a lot of people would tell me to turn off the TV and pick up a book, that I would make nothing out of myself if I just kept watching TV. But for me, those 3 things were very important. And they were very important because I was born in '87, and up to 1997 in Ecuador, homosexuality was still a crime. Therefore, comic books, sitcoms, and sci-fi were the only spaces where I could try and construct or create a sense of community for myself, where I could see people like me and where I could try and shape my identity. After I grew up, I decided to study journalism, and after finishing my studies in journalism, the only thing that I knew for sure was that I didn't want to be a journalist. I have nothing against journalists, but it just wasn't for me. So I had just spent 5 years of my life studying something that I didn't want to do. And I was in a lot of uncertainty, and I started talking to people, and a lot of people were telling me, okay, now you should just pick up something that is useful. And when they said useful, they were talking about MBAs, or they were talking about economics, or they were talking about something like that. And because I never listened to people when they tell me things, I decided that I wouldn't study something that others saw as useful, but that I would study something that for me was important. So I packed my bags and I went to the UK to study at University of Sussex and joined up their gender and media program. While I was studying there, I got the opportunity to meet a lot of great people and to revise a lot of great literature. I even got the opportunity to meet the great Judith Butler, which for me was almost a religious experience. But the thing that I had trouble finding while I was in the UK was other people from the South, other people like me and other people like us that were studying ourselves, that were studying our culture. And it felt that most of what we did was always being seen from the outside and not by those of us who were living it. So after I finished my master's, I came back to Guayaquil and I joined up Universidad Casa Grande, which is a small private university that has barely reaches 1,000 students for undergrad and another 1,000 students for postgrad. And when I joined Casa Grande, they were kind enough to let me do what I wanted to do, which was study the media and study our media and study our culture and study our media consumption from our own eyes. I was partially inspired by the effort that GLAAD, the Gay and Lesbian Alliance Against Defamation, does in the United States. They're an organization that strives to increase the participation and the representation of the LGBTQI plus population in American media. And I borrowed from them, and we designed in the university a content analysis that would help us bring an objective view towards how the media were representing both heterosexual women, but also the LGBTQI plus population. And so we studied the media, we studied hundreds and thousands of hours of Ecuadorian programming. And what we realized is that Ecuadorian programming was mostly like most of the programming everywhere else in the world. Those in power were there and were represented, and those who didn't have power either were excluded or they were vilified or they were objectified. So this was especially troubling for us in a country where 6 out of 10 women are victims of gender violence, and 90% of the time that violence is being perpetrated by their husbands or partners, and where 7 out of 10 LGBTQI plus population are being discriminated upon, but that discrimination is originating within their own families. That made us realize that we didn't just want to do research because we didn't want research to remain in library or to just circle academic sectors, that we thought and we felt the moral imperative to do more than that we didn't think that academia should just devote itself to teaching and research, but that academia had maybe a more important role, and that had to do with community outreach, and that had to do with affecting those realities that we thought that were radically wrong. Therefore, we said, okay, if we are seeing something that is wrong, then we need to say something about it. And that's how one of the projects that I'm going to talk about was born or came to be. It is proyectosum.com. It's one that is very close to my heart. It started as a graduation project within the university where different students from different careers would join up. That was founded on the principle that all of the work that we will do would be horizontal, meaning that our students had a voice, that no teacher was on top of those students, but that it was it was really a collaborative effort where we could produce or strive to produce change. It started, or when we started it, we approached those people that were or had been already doing an important job in these topics. So far, we've worked with more than 30 different NGOs within Guayaquil and Ecuador that fight for human rights or to combat gender violence. And we sat with them and we said, okay, so this is what TV is looking like, what TV looks now. What do you think that should be different? And after the first talks, we realized that the whole tone of the project was a lot punitive, or placing a lot of guilt on top of the media. And we didn't want to create a project that was just denouncing what was wrong. We wanted to try and build something different. Therefore, we decided that we didn't just need to talk, we had to listen. So we invited the people from those media organizations that we have constructed, like Mr. Burns from The Simpsons, like these evil people that wanted to destroy the world and help perpetuate violence against women and the LGBTQI plus populations. And then we realized that these people weren't so evil, and that these people were people just like us that had been raised in the same system with the same prejudices and with the same stereotypes in place. And that when you talk to them, they had been reproducing a lot of the stuff that they had learned just because they had never had the chance to question it. So joining efforts with the people from the media organizations and with people from the NGOs and in these projects and in these initiatives that were being led by the students, we made Zoom grow. And now Zoom does a lot more than the content analysis research that it's started doing. We do continue doing that because we think that there's a role and a space for that. But now we try to curate life stories of the people in Guayaquil and their coming out and their families. We produce animated shorts, documentaries. We train the media. We've been helping organize the Pride in Guayaquil for the last 3 years. We've instated classes within our own university, gender and media and gender focus for social projects, but we've also tried to bring our message to other colleges and to other campuses. We produce queer art shows and many more things. And we are very excited and we've been very happy about the work that we've been doing. But this is still the reality of our country. And when you see that after 8 years of working and busting your ass off and saying, okay, I'm striving to change the world, and seeing that the world isn't changing, it's really, really easy to feel discouraged and to try and quit. So what we did was, okay, realize that the reality that we're living hasn't necessarily changed. So we've taken that and said, okay, we need to do more. We cannot quit. We have to keep working on this. But also that we needed to look inside and look at ourselves and maybe try and see what had changed in all of these years, and what had changed for the university and was basically us. After Proyecto Zoom came to be, our students have done a lot more and they have radically changed. Our students walk around the town dressed like the women from Handmaid's Tale, fighting for their right to choose over their bodies. Our students are pursuing their masters in gender studies around the world. Our students are running for office. Our students are demanding that their businesses where they work at change the way that they change the policies and the way that they address topics like sexual harassment. Our students change. And in that, Proyecto Zoom became what the comic books and Buffy the Vampire Slayer had been for me. It became a beacon. It became a place where all of the misfits and where all the people that felt different would see that it was okay to be different and it was okay to act different. But also they noticed, and Zoom has helped them to realize that when you live in a society that isn't what you think that it should be, you cannot remain complacent and you cannot wait for someone else to do something about it. You have to act and you have to do something to change it. So we showed our students that they had to act, and Zoom has become the place where they can act. Along with Zoom, I've been lucky enough to help coordinate 159 other different social projects that range from a myriad of topics. We try and fight the vertical transmission of HIV from young mothers to their children. We help kids with cancer. We produce art shows for people who cannot see, and a lot of stuff. And in a university that has just 1,000 students for undergrad, we have graduated 892 students through these projects and through these initiatives. Now, these alternatives, which are called PAPs, Applied Research Projects, graduate 50% of our student population each year. And we do think that even if we haven't solved all of the problems or all of the things that are wrong with society, we have helped change who we were as a university. After all of this, I just want you to remember maybe 3 things. One is that when you see something, you have to say something, but then you also have to do something. The other is that maybe, well, results matter, but so does the journey, meaning sometimes we strive to accomplish something, but we end up accomplishing something else. And if you just change the way that you're looking at things, you might realize that you've accomplished something sometimes even better. And finally, that in these times of coronavirus, talking about media representation or talking about gender violence might seem not as a priority for a lot of people, and unfortunately for some of the people who govern us, but that I think that these issues are nowadays even more urgent to look at. In the case of Ecuador, we're seeing that because we're in a quarantine, we're seeing that women who were already victims of domestic violence are now trapped in quarantine with their abusers, and LGBT youth that were already being subjected to violence and to harassment by their own families are now trapped with their families inside their houses. So just remain vigilant and keep up the fight. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that reminder, Jose. Yes, we are living a moment in time that requires even more compassion, leadership, and community, especially when so many of our faulty structure. Oh, can you hear me? Yes, okay. When so many of our faulty structures are being exposed, and so are the disparities. And so with that, we open it up to Q&A. If we don't have any questions from the audience yet, please do send in your questions. I can start us off with a question in the meantime. What do you think, Michelle? Is that okay?
There was one question, and which I think this applies to everyone. If you have, oh, Jose, are you able to hear us? I think he's having some audio trouble. So I think this is great for all three to share any resources or websites. That was a question that came up earlier. So I think for your project, Jose and Jump Math, and Dewey, if you have anything else you want to share from your perspective, this would be a great time to drop it in the chat. And then Nora, I'll go ahead and turn it back over to you. Jose, can you hear us?
Yeah, I can hear you. Perfect.
Okay, perfect.
All right.
Nora's gonna ask a couple of
yes, but for those of you that are in the audience, thank you for staying with us, and please do send in any of your questions. I will start us off with a question to all three panelists, and to follow on your closing remark, Jose. And I wonder if there's anything as change makers and in your change making journey that you see clearly now that you couldn't see 3 months ago. I asked this question to our Big Idea Talk speakers yesterday as well. Is there anything about your change making journey and the work that you're doing and the institutions you're a part of that you see clearly now that you couldn't see 3 months ago?
If I could start,
Yes,
I'd
please.
say that it's even clearer now that academia and that universities need to be a social actor for change, that we cannot remain inside our four walls and talking just to ourselves, and that we have to put our resources and all of our resources towards doing more. To me, it serves no purpose to do research just for the purpose of producing knowledge. I know that there's a space for that, but even that research and even traditional research should be created with an outcome, or should be thought of with an outcome. What do I want to change in society? It shouldn't be enough to try and understand how the world works. We should all strive to try and change it for the better, because coronavirus is showing us, I guess, that the system that we have doesn't work, and maybe works for the 1% of the 1%, but it doesn't work for anyone else. Violence is there, discrimination is there, dynamics of exclusion are there. Women, LGBTQI plus populations, and people of color are subjected or are getting the brunt of the coronavirus pandemic. So as people within the universities, we do not just have a responsibility to produce better students or better citizens. We also have other resources that we have to devote in order to change the world that we have around us.
I can go next if that's fine. Thanks, Jose. So I would say one thing I see clear right now is that every student would love to contribute to their communities in one way or form. I feel, however, I mean, being in an academic sort of environment, some of them feel constrained given the course load and stuff and all that burden. So I think it would definitely be useful for a lot of the universities or educational institutions to implement also like a bit of community service even within class projects. So even though the best way would be to apply whatever we learn in class and apply it to our community directly, rather than keeping it very theoretical. We can bridge that gap between education and the community. So.
Sorry, I was having trouble unmuting myself. So I agree with Jose that the most vulnerable people are being hit the hardest. You know, in math, the people with parents who have computers who can get them in tutoring programs, they'll be fine, but the most vulnerable kids won't be. And it's been kind of frightening because it's made it even more clear to me how how vulnerable we are when we don't understand or respect science or risk or probability or things like that. It's just frightening that we don't understand the threats that we're facing. And ironically, you know, these ideas that everyone should be a problem solver, everyone should be creative and so on, I believe in deeply, but if you don't implement those ideas with, you know, with rigor and science and evidence, then it has the opposite effect. We have a generation who, because they struggled so much in math, never want to see a problem again in their life. They are anti-intellectual, anti-scientific. And they have a deep sense of frustration and helplessness that came from, I think, failing in a subject that they should be able to excel in. So the need to really look at evidence and make sure every child is achieving their full potential is just more and more urgent, because we won't be able to handle these crises, and the most vulnerable people will suffer more and more if we don't do something about it. And rich, progressive, educated people have to look really carefully about what they're advocating, you know, as ways that work in math, and make sure that what they're advocating, they've tested and tried in the trenches and it's working for the most vulnerable people.
Thank you. We have a question from Kelly, where this is for you, Dewi, but it's also open to the rest of the panel. I think that systems like Safe BOGO are super, though I worry that these kinds of initiatives benefit those who can afford a safe ride and thus increase disparities and inequities. I worry that no ride to school on the back of the bike with 3 other kids is more dangerous than a risky ride if that is all that they can afford.
So great question, Kelly. Thanks for your concern. So the primarily safe border, yes, there is a bit of a limitation in that, yes, they're very also tech-focused company, but I guess the beauty of it is they make it more affordable. So the transportation is actually made cheaper because it's standardized, right? So I think it makes it more affordable for some of these children to either go to school or any normal person to fulfill their duties because of the reduction in price and increase in safety. Thank
you. We also have a question from Ken. I think there are 2 different research. One is research for making sure of the hypothesis. The other is research for real problem solving. Do you think so?
I agree. But my problem with research sometimes is not necessarily the type of research that we have, but what triggers them. And I think that what triggers research should be a desire to make the world a better place, as naive as that might sound. And most of the time, what triggers research is a desire to advance your own career or to nurture your own ego, and the desire just to publish and comply with what universities demand that you do. And that we have to start rebelling against that. We should produce research, we should produce more knowledge, but it's what moves that knowledge, what is behind the idea of doing that should change, I think.
Yeah, I agree, and it's a complex issue. I'm a mathematician and do pure math, and sometimes the results that have the greatest impact are things that people pursue just because they're beautiful or because they're curious, and they end up having the biggest impacts in the world. But I also agree that we need to focus more research on solutions to the most pressing problems, and make sure we put theory into practice, and as I've said before, constantly test it and refine it. So I think we need a balance between pure research driven by pure beauty and curiosity, and research that's in the mud and trying to solve problems in the real world.
None. No, thank you.
Ken, are you satisfied with the answer? Okay. Thank you for your questions. Yes. Okay. I don't see any other questions, so we do have some time. And if it's okay, Michelle, can I ask another question?
Oh, sure. Yeah, please go ahead.
Okay, great. So you all kind of come from different, or you have different backgrounds and are working on different issues and causes. What would you say, because the session is, after all, about values, what are some of the values that you know you will need to take with you into the future of your change-making journey? Who would like to start us off?
Well, I guess I could go first. Yeah, I've met and worked with a lot of Shoka fellows and social entrepreneurs and change makers, and they all seem to have in common a sense of empathy and just an incapacity to watch people suffer or be subject on the many unfair practices in the world. I think that's what drives most social entrepreneurs, that we just can't stand to see it happen. And certainly for me, because I struggled in math, I mean, I remember comparing myself to the faster students and the ones who'd write competitions. I almost failed calculus the first time at university and always had this sense of inferiority. And so when I finally developed confidence in math, I never wanted other students or people to suffer that same feeling. And I think that's what drove most of my work and made me very observant. When a kid didn't get something, I didn't blame them. I thought there must be something wrong with my approach, and I'll try something different.
Thanks, John. So I would say in terms of value, one that came to mind was compassion, right? So, I mean, everybody's in a different, let's say, class in society or has a different income or things like that. However, if one is more fortunate than the other, try to also place yourself in the shoes of someone who's not as fortunate as yourself and think about what your life could have been. And I think having this mentality in mind would sort of try to reach equity. I mean, it's not necessarily like fully feasible, but we can make a stride towards it. And through compassion, I believe that's how we build this community service and builds onto empathy and other values like that. So to me, compassion is the most valuable.
For me, I was raised under the premise that we have to give ourselves fully to others and that we're not in this world just, or we cannot just limit ourselves to lend a part of what we do to those people. So it would be that, the idea that if we've had the privilege to go to school, if we have the privilege to have a bit more than the person that is right next to us, the world is better the more diverse it is, and we have to ensure equality at its fullest in order to ensure that diversity. Because as John also said, the people that are more vulnerable now are the people who are unfortunately usually the most vulnerable in most situations. So the more we do for them, the richer and the better the world is going to be.
Maybe to build on something Dewey said, if you have a sense of compassion or empathy, you recognize, the importance of equity. And one thing that really surprised me, I decided to teach math rather than other subjects because there's research suggesting that's the subject where you can close the gap most efficiently, which is quite surprising because people think math is the hardest subject, but it's an ideal tool for social justice. And we have a lot of knowledge and technology and wealth, but we've had trouble eradicating material poverty. And I believe one of the reasons is we've never eradicated intellectual poverty. And as that bell curve I showed you shows, within a year or two, you can eradicate intellectual poverty. You can get everyone thinking and working at roughly the same level with no extra cost. And so I think to make the world more equitable, we've been overlooking one of the easiest solutions, which is just teach math and the sciences well, or any subject well. And then I think we'll be able to shift the needle on material poverty and have a more compassionate society and more equality. But most people wouldn't think, well, math, who cares about math? I mean, only a few people could do it. But we have to start every kid has a right to realize their full intellectual potential in every subject, and we have to start giving them that right.
Thank you. And with that, I want to thank each and every one of you for the work that you do, and for, in the spirit of our land acknowledgement earlier today, for holding the systems in place that you operate within accountable for the important work that you're doing, and for the values that you are holding yourselves and your communities accountable to. And I want to thank everybody that joined us today for listening and for contributing in to our discussion, and for Ashoka, you for giving us the space.
Thank you, everyone. And I hope everyone can make it to the keynote at 12:30. People are connecting on Slack, people are sending emails. If you need help connecting with anyone, feel free to reach out and send me an email as well. The videos from yesterday and today will be available in a couple of weeks. So thank you all for joining.
Bye.